welcome back to the last session of Track A for the day. How many of you have been in here all day long, to every single session in this room? Raise your hand. Okay, a few of you, and then the rest of you have been moving around, which is also a lot of fun. I'm Donna Sheeter. I'm the moderator for this session, and I also want to say I think you should give yourselves a round of applause for your dedication for being here for the very last session of the day. Yay! Good work. I heard a lot of energy in the room, which is also nice. What's going to happen, too, you'll be rewarded when this is finished. I want to remind you that following this session, if you go to the exhibition area, there's a networking reception with some goodies and some nice beverages and some few things to nibble on, and lots of good people to talk to. So please be sure you stop by the networking reception when this session is done. I'm going to briefly introduce our two speakers, and they're going to do their presentations. We're going to ask you to hold questions till we're saving time at the end for that, at least 5 minutes, and if they get done earlier, then there'll be a little more time than that. But if you could hold your questions till the end. And I'm very pleased to present to you today Hasan Syed, who is the Vice President of Knowledge Management for the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago, which is one of 11 U.S. government-sponsored banks that provide reliable liquidity to member financial institutions, such as banks, thrifts, credit unions, insurers, and community development financial institutions. And he is being joined by Mary Little, who is a hometown person here, practical lead at Enterprise Knowledge, which is a consulting firm focused on delivering knowledge and information management solutions in an agile way. If you want to read more about our presenters, you can go on to the online program. There's a whole lot more information, or of course you can always Google them. So please join me in welcoming Hasan and Mary to KML.
Thank you, Donna. So as knowledge management professionals, we all know the value of knowledge management. However, sometimes one of the challenges that we face is getting buy-in from senior stakeholders to really invest in all of our efforts and what we're trying to undergo within the organization. So Hasan and I are here today to share our story about the great work we're doing at the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago, and hopefully you can take away some learning lessons that you can apply to your own efforts. But first, let's talk a little bit about our background and who we are.
Hello, my name is Hasan Syed. I have many years of experience working in information technology area. I started out as a developer, programmer, did a lot of Y2K projects. How many here may have done the Y2K? I've done a lot of development for the bank. I was a production operations support person during the day and night. I've done the really, overnight support, which is really hardest thing to do. I was a development manager, rolled out several enterprise-wide applications throughout the bank. I was a production operations manager, managed enterprise data warehouse, business intelligence for the bank. I was a coordinator between IT and business to help improve communication between the two. I've helped create a few policies and standards for IT, and I've chaired a few committees that had participation all across the bank. In my current role, I've started knowledge management last year. My responsibility or my passion is to roll out the knowledge management concept, help understand what knowledge management is, and how it will help the bank to achieve overall objective of the bank.
And I've had the great pleasure of partnering with Hasan on the exciting initiatives that are happening at the bank. I'm Mary Little, and I am a practice lead. I manage our knowledge management practice at Enterprise Knowledge, and that mostly involves leading large global commercial firms through knowledge management and through change. And my focus is really on human-centered design and agile methodology, as well as change management and organizational development. So you're probably wondering what FHLBC is.
Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago is one of the 11 home loan banks across the U.S. We were chartered by U.S. Congress in 1932. Sole purpose of our creation was to promote home ownership during the time of Depression. Ever since, we have been providing liquidity to our members at a very competitive rate. We have been providing a lot of return on the investments and spending a lot of money into the community-based project based on our members' recommendation. Size-wise, number of employees-wise, we are close to 450 to 500 employees. If we add consultants, the total number becomes, I think, 600 to 700 overall workforce. However, the assets that we manage, we're $70 billion bank. So you can see, how employees to, the amount that the financial ratio that we manage is pretty high. Overall, if you look at the Federal Home Loan Bank system across the country, we are close to $1 trillion enterprise. How many of you can relate to this picture? These are the content repositories that we have only within IT. When it comes to challenges, we have many challenges that we can relate to as it relates to knowledge management. But I would like to discuss here just these three, a very high level, that are being very challenging for the bank for us. We have no governance process per se. We have very, no guideline as to how to create contents, where to store them, and things like that. Because of that, finding information is very hard for individuals who are looking for information when they need it. In the absence of knowledge sharing culture, we don't collaborate. There are a lot of individuals who like to hoard knowledge to themselves, and when they leave, the knowledge goes with them. IT department within the bank has several different subgroups. We have production operations, software development, security, infrastructure, project delivery, etc. When we create content, the quality of the content depends on which group created it. Not only that, who within that group created the content also, dictates what the quality of the contents are. When the contents are created, where to, save those contents for sharing, where those contents live, also depends on group's discretion. So if you're a consumer, if I'm a consumer, I'm looking for information to solve any problem or issue that I'm dealing with at any given point. I have to go and look for information in every content repository. Luckily, if I find it, what I would do, I have my own preference of content repository. I would make a copy and save that into that content repository so that I can find it later. What that does, it creates multiple copies of the same content. So next time when third person comes in and looking for information, good luck. We have information that lives on in these content repositories that goes as far back as 10, 15 years. There are contents that are still online for the applications that no longer exist in the bank because we don't archive, we don't retire these content. We are really in need for have a proper governance in this process. Again, I just touched on findability is a huge issue. What our goal is with the knowledge management is, when we go and apply the knowledge management principles and the tools that we are working with Mary and her team, we'll have that findability issue goes away.
Yep, you might want to talk into you.
Sure. Also, in the absence of knowledge sharing culture, bank is a very unique place where when you come and start working for the bank, very few people leave because the benefits and everything else that bank offers. What that does, it creates a lot of tacit knowledge, and people feel that when they have this knowledge that they've acquired working with the bank for as long as they have, it creates the job security. And they feel good, you know, people, when there's a problem and people come to them and talk to them, and they feel good, you know, they are the one who solve the problem. What that does, you know, that knowledge stays with them. At any given point when they leave, knowledge goes with them. With the knowledge management initiative that I'm leading in this regard, we are hoping that, you know, that culture that we'll cultivate that will eliminate that issue. Every company, when it comes to knowledge management is a very broad concept. Every company has their own way of implementing or rolling out knowledge management. Some companies are focusing on AI. Some companies are looking at strictly on the content management system. It is very important when you bring in an initiative like this, you have a very defined definition of the KM specific to your organizations. So this is, you know, we have some certain core values that we operate in. This definition is very specific to our bank. And I think it's very important to, that I would read this. So what is knowledge management for the bank? It is an integrated approach to identify, capture, evaluate, retrieve, and share our information assets for the whole bank. Ability to provide knowledge to the right person at the right time to create value. Now, this one-liner is a key. This is one of the things that I use when I start talking to individuals at every level. You know, when they come and ask, hey, so what are you, you know, bringing to the bank? This is what I say, and this one line help them understand what we're trying to do, because these are the challenges that are not limited to IT, but it's all over across the bank. It is very important that your definitions are aligned with the overall company's strategy. You know, for the bank, agile teams, you know, nimble. We are an agile shop, and with the limited employees and number of assets that we are managing, it's very important for us to be able to, you know, play different roles within the organization. So being nimble is a huge thing for us. So knowledge management for us, it's a cultural change. Whenever you talk about the cultural change, you know, it's hard. People don't. Change is a hard thing. You know, when you bring in and talk to people, hey, this will change the way you do things on your work environment. It's hard to understand and change. So, initiative like this, where you are changing the culture, it's very important to start small. So what we did, we picked service desk or IT support area for two reasons. One, service desk is a consumer of all the artifacts or contents that we create within IT. Number two, service desk is also an interface with the business, you know, and dealing with the day-to-day issues that business is you know, throwing at them, and you know, they're in supporting those issues. They are, you know, looking for those contents that IT is creating to solve those issues. So we've created few pilots for. So before we start, we wanted to know where we stand as far as the maturity goes. Maturity goes related to KM, where service desks stand. So we hired Mary's team to do the analysis for us to see, you know, how the service desk operates when it comes to knowledge management and how we get to the more mature state.
Yeah, so one of the things that was very clear when we first met with Hasan and the team at FHLBC is that they were experiencing a lot of change fatigue, a lot of change all the time, and they just couldn't fathom the thought of another change. But the fact that we took this really agile approach where we first started by discovering what their challenges were so that we could articulate those to the senior leaders and demonstrate that we could actually implement knowledge management solutions on a very small scale, in this case, the service desk. we were able to then build a case for, hey, CAM isn't one of those things that, it's not just a fuzzy concept, or it's not something that fails all the time. It's something that can actually deliver value to the organization. So it was a combination approach of really communicating that value, but also showing it, and then getting more and more investment in it. So we started small rather than tackling all of the challenges at the enterprise level, because we just wouldn't have been able to build a case to solve all of the organizational challenges if we started with that first. So we are in the midst of the implementation for the service desk while we're trying to understand the challenges that are going on at an enterprise level. And so this is the approach that we've taken so far. Some of you may be familiar with some of these concepts, such as current state and target state. But for us, it was really important to understand what the challenges were that this organization was facing. And it really differed from group to group and as a whole across the organization. So we spent a lot of time doing interviews and focus groups with different groups within the bank, and within those groups, the little subgroups, to really understand what their challenges were across these 5 CAM work streams. So we talked about the people, who within your group or within the organization holds knowledge and who needs it, and what does that flow look like from one person's head to another person's head? Is that something formal, like capturing content on SharePoint, or is it a little bit more informal, such as knowledge shares? And it really differed across the bank. We also evaluated their processes as it relates to capturing and managing information and sharing that information. We talked to them about what was working well and what needed some improvement. We also talked about the type of content that they had and the different topics of content, so that we could get a really good idea of what the subject matter is that they were dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And something that really stood out with this project is our evaluation of their culture. So within the bank and within the various groups, was there a knowledge sharing culture? Were people open to taking the expertise that they had, and were they open to sharing it with others, or were they more siloed and they built that expertise and just kept it to themselves to do their work? And then lastly, and very intentionally last, is technology. We looked at the various systems that Hasan talked about, but we were very careful to communicate that this wasn't a technology project. This was more so a cultural transformation project. And that's really key, because we knew that in order for this to stick, we weren't just gonna put a new tool in front of everybody and say, here is the solution to all of your KM challenges. We really had to approach it from all of those different angles. And then we took the inputs that we received from these interviews and focus groups, came up with common themes, and matched it with the information that we found in their actual content and in their systems. So a top-down, human-driven approach matched with a bottom-up approach looking at the actual information that they were creating. And we took those findings and we put them in front of leadership and said, here's what we're finding. Now help guide us in prioritizing these challenges to see what's foundational. And we matched those findings up with Enterprise Knowledge's 32-factor benchmark, which is very observation-based. Some of you may be familiar with similar tools that are kind of data-based, but this is us actually talking to people and observing them in their work environment and really understanding how they match up to each other within the bank and with similar industries as far as their maturity level and where they needed to be. And this helped us to develop a year-long roadmap of what they needed to complete over the course of the first year so that they were moving the needle in the right direction. But very important to this was the foundational piece of designing this KM leadership team. And what we mean by that is these 4 initiatives right here are the initiatives that we came up with based on the prioritization that we did: team collaboration, content and taxonomy, search and technology, training and development. These were all critical for the bank in order to solve some of the challenges that Hasan spoke about. But in order to make these successful, we had to have the proper leadership to lead each of these initiatives. And so we spent some time identifying who these leaders were, talking about what their roles and responsibilities were, and giving them the skills and the tools that they needed to lead their respective initiatives.
So one day, we had a team meeting with our boss. Bank is a very is a financial institution, as you know. Financial institutions are very highly regulated. We are not only a financial institution, but also GSE, kind of like Fannie and Freddie. So we are regulated by FHFA, very strict rules and regulations that we have to operate under. One day, my boss comes into our meeting, in our team meeting, and he had a list of broken controls. We have several standards, policies, and procedures that we operate, that we use to do our job on a daily basis. With the list of controls, he asked a question, well, why these controls are broken, and what can we do so that this is not repeated, going forward. To which I asked, do we even know what these controls means? What policies or standards these controls support? And surely he said, why don't you find out? So I had a meeting with all the managers within IT and brought up this question as to, in your areas, when people do their job, do they understand how their job is related to the overall bank goals and how we are supporting the strategic plan that we have, how these jobs are rolling up to following the procedures that rolls up to the standard that are controlled by certain policies? The answer was no. A lot of things we do on our job responsibilities because this is always done. Because finding procedures is hard to do. If I need to do this, I have to find this procedure, and I don't want to go into all these content repositories to look for that information because I know I will hit with 6,000 hits. And going through each and every content to figure out, how my job is, how I'm solving the problem is really hard for me to do. With that in mind, this is, with improving the findability, you are actually essentially improving the productivity. When people are not spending time looking for information in these content repositories, they'll be spending more time and being more productive. Another story, I was in a conference call not too long ago where there was some process broke down, overnight process broke down. Some vendor who was supposed to send the data overnight has some data type mismatch, which did not load it to in one of our systems. They had some downstream system where this data would go from one system to another and then another. Stepping through the steps, being an IT person, that's easy to do. You can look for what steps, where this data goes from one step to another. What an IT person doesn't know, what the impact would be if this process is not complete. If the trading desk comes in the morning and accounting data or some financial data is not available, what kind of impact that will have on the trading desk? If the accounting information is missing, how it impacts the accounting department, how it affect the overall bottom line. So again, understanding the whole system and the processes, collaborating the information. I was surprised that there was not a single person within IT who can tell how this impact. So so the next thing, we have a process where every day in the morning we send out a notification to the business where we tell the health of the system if it's okay, everything is everything completed or not. Within the communication, we also suggest what the impact is, and not only the application level, technical level, but also what the impact would be in the business level. So having that kind of information, having that collaboration in place, it's a key. And knowledge management overall provide that to us, and this is what we're trying to do. It's a true customer service when you're talking to your customer in a knowledgeable way as to what is impacted and what is not. It creates trust between you and the customers. When you understand your processes, when you understand what you're doing, you tend to innovate. You create more, repeatable processes where, you can cut down the fat, where you don't have to do certain things where you always used to do. And obviously, when you know what you're doing, it's less risky to do.
Yep, so the key takeaway there is that this partnership worked because Hasan had this deep institutional knowledge about the bank's challenges, and matched with this knowledge management best practice approach to develop a strategy and implement it, we were able to really get a lot of buy-in and investment to do the things that we wanted to do.
So again, it is very, very important that, when you bring in initiative like KM, it is aligned with the overall strategic initiative of the bank, of your company. The core goal for the bank, we are owned by our members. So core goal for the bank is to provide value to our members. How do we do that? We have to reduce costs, operational costs, that, the way we operate. Create those repeatable processes, achieve the operational excellence to provide value to our members. Have a teamwork, create some accountability between, amongst the teams, and improve communication. So it's very important that the KM does provide that.
And Hasan's ability to really articulate how our initiative aligned with some of the strategic initiatives and efforts going on at the bank was really one of the keys to our success. And so we finally got our funding to roll out some of those recommendations that we had proposed for the service desk. And as I mentioned, creating that leadership team was the very first step in that. And so in order to even arrive at this org structure, we had to do some organizational analysis. And what I mean by that is we took the main stakeholders that would be impacted by this change, and we put them in a room and we asked them questions about their organization. And we measured their perceptions of who they were and who they wanted to be in the future. So for example, we would ask, is this leadership team on the spectrum of servant leadership versus command and control? Where do you all fall now versus where do you want to fall? Or risk avoidance. Are you risk tolerant, or are you leaning in and wanting to take as many risks and be as innovative as possible? And so we learned that the bank does have a good culture. They want that servant leadership style leading the way. However, because of the highly regulated nature of this bank, we had to put in some controls. And so this structure is what emerged from that workshop, where we really tried to understand what leadership framework would work best for them. And as you can see, it's not your typical org chart. It's more of a flatter structure with some accountability in each of these areas. And central to that is a KM champion. And this gentleman, in this case, his job was really he really had to understand what KM was, because he would be the person who people would come to and ask, what are you guys doing anyway, and why are we spending time on this? So he had to really be able to articulate what knowledge management was. And he also had to remove roadblocks, right? So he still had a day job, but he knows exactly what these individuals serving as leads in this structure are doing. So he had to remove roadblocks like other competing initiatives, or people who were non-believers in KM. And that was his primary job. And then you had individuals who were held accountable for each of these work streams that we identified. And that was really key, because we needed somebody to represent the different stakeholders that would be impacted by this. Oftentimes, when you don't assign that individual, nobody makes a decision, or you get 5 different decisions. And so this was the go-to person there. And then also key to the structure was the co-leads. So this allowed for continuity. I mean, they're a very busy bank, and inevitably the leads would not be able to attend critical meetings or really pull their weight because they had competing priorities. But these leads served as the continuity point to keep the initiatives going, even when this individual was not as present as they needed to be. And it also served as an opportunity for these individuals to learn what KM was and demonstrate some leadership skills and give them an opportunity to grow into a stronger leadership position within the bank. And so what we did for them was we created custom role descriptions that laid out exactly what they were going to do. We communicated that to them during their workshop, where we trained them how to be agile leaders and how we trained them to really understand the value of KM. Now, keep in mind, these are IT professionals. These guys are developers, they're IT support team members, and so they would look at something like team collaboration and be like, I don't know the next thing to that. So we had to spend time also really educating them on the different KM principles that fell under their role. So, although they are immersed in technology, they may not know enterprise search. They don't know what a taxonomy is and how that is used to describe information so that it's more findable. These are new terms to them, and so it was a great educational experience for them to carve out time in their day to serve in these roles that were really critical to the organization.
So one of the things that, when I started out the KM initiative at the bank last year, whenever I went and talked to individuals, the senior management, my peers, or people who are in the trenches about KM, the first thing that came out of their mind, or their mouth is, so what tool are we implementing? And this was huge. The only thing they know coming out of, whenever we talk about the knowledge management or things like that, they always think that there's a tool that is being implemented. With the KM initiative, there are several initiatives are going on at the bank, and this is one of the key things I think that that probably is a takeaway for you also, that initiative like this has to align with the overall strategic initiative in your organizations. So we have a few going on at the bank. We have a core team that is being mandated by our president. That the goal for that team is to help improve the overall processing that we do across the bank. They're looking at different products and looking at from start to end how to improve those processes, how we can create the repeatable process and stuff like that. We, talk to them in a way that we looked at what they're working on and what we are proposing as part of the knowledge management initiative, where we can align, how we can help each other, how knowledge management provides the building blocks to what they are working on, and they were like all on board. It was like they really liked the idea. We have currently, as Mary mentioned, we have 2 initiatives going on at the bank. We are implementing the roadmap for the service desk. And we're also doing the similar baseline analysis for the enterprise, where we're trying to see how mature we are when it comes to KM principles. So for that, in order for anyone to know what's going on with these 2 initiatives and what KM is, we've created a SharePoint site where it's a one-stop shop. Everybody can go and get the information when they need it. We have also kind of to create the buzz across the organization, because it's a brand new. We've created some KM pins that we handed out to all the knowledge champions across the bank. So the idea was when they're wearing those pins in their lanyards or on their clothes, people would ask, what that pin means, and that will start the conversation with what the KM is and talk about it. We have big screens, TVs all across different floors in the bank, and the purpose of those TVs are to communicate the public service, public communication per se. So we have a few slides related to KM that are constantly running so that people can see what's going on in the bank. And we also have created like 2 or 3 gamification events with the service desk. Essentially, what we did was we asked the service desk to come up with a pitch, a Twitter pitch. Define KM in few words, so that that will kind of like ignite the thinking, for them to understand, to learn what KM is, and the winner would get the prize. So that was a very fun event. We also brought in the service desk into a room where we asked, tell us what are the top 5 issues that they have dealt with for any given week or month. Within an hour, we got 45 issues. And to my surprise, none of them was documented. So it was like, it was pretty huge. So what we did was we we established, 4 or 5 different teams, have them pick top 5 issues out of 45 and start working on them, document them. The idea was, the winner will then get the prize. And so winner will get the prize, they worked on it, and now we have a backlog of issues that, we could now put in our KB in the knowledge management system. The third thing that we did with the gamification was, what was the third one? Forgot.
So we did the Twitter pitch. We had people also define what knowledge management was. They resolved those issues, but they also competed on being the first to document.
I remember now.
Yeah.
What was the game? The 10. What was the application that had the?
Oh, Kahoot. Yeah. So we brought in Kahoot, which is an online game where you tested their knowledge on KM, and it was very interactive. Everybody was on their phone, and they were taking the KM learning and really applying that to their environment and really absorbing these KM concepts.
Yeah, exactly, and that was a very well received because, before we had this Kahoot competition, we had gone through some level of training, what KM is. The general concept is to, what KM is, what KM can do for them, and how it can help them. And having gone through that exercise, it was a pretty fun exercise, and they loved it. And now they know what KM is and really excited about implementing it.
Yeah, so 2 things there. Our strategic communications approach was one about bringing awareness to KM. If people don't know what KM is or what you're doing, they're likely going to do redundant work, similar things that you're doing, but going in their own direction. So having those strategic alignment meetings were really important. And 2, bringing the fun back into KM fundamentals, like really having fun with it. It doesn't have to be, something that only academics bring into the environment. It's not just about library sciences. So the gamification piece really brought a lot of energy to KM and created, as Hasan said, this buzz that had people asking us, what's going on over there and how can we be a part of that?
So, so far, we have increased the awareness of the KM initiative, a very high level engagement and adoption of the KM solutions. We got the executive buy-in right after when we did the KM analysis for the service desk. For upcoming events, we have content strategy development that we're currently working on, team collaboration and learning development plan implementation. Search and taxonomy tool, we're very excited to implement those tools pretty soon. And there will be a list of enterprise-wide pilots that we're currently working on that will be rolled out soon.
And slowly but surely, we are embedding KM into FHLBC's culture, whether they know it or not. Thank you.
One of the challenges that we have at the bank, initiative like this, it requires money, and IT has the largest budget. Even though we consider it as a cost center, but IT has the money to roll this out. Con is, again, like I said, every time when I go and talk to the people that we are bringing this initiative, the question was, what tool are we implementing?
Well, I would also add to that the individuals that were part of that KM leadership team, they were implementing those things like a search tool and a taxonomy and content strategy at the IT level, but they are also going to be the same people who are going to support it for the entire enterprise. And so from a change management perspective, teaching them what those things are and the value of them really help them to spread the word about those things when they roll out to the whole organization.
Would you say that you can see the results of the initiatives that you've implemented? Okay, so how do you measure? Are you measuring those results, and how are you measuring the results?
So I think the measurement would be when people spending less time looking for information and saving those hours that they would spend otherwise looking for information, that would be the biggest ROI in this whole thing. And then when we share information and knowledge together, that culture, would be huge success.
And I think there's also like a balance of quantitative and qualitative. So what's great about the bank is that they're not measuring the effectiveness of CAM performance at all. So it gives us an opportunity to create that baseline and develop an analytic strategy to be able to then measure our success. So it's a combination of just, can you feel the energy around collaboration? That's the qualitative piece. Like, does it seem visibly like that people are sharing information? But then they also have systems like ServiceNow and SharePoint and DocuWiki that we're going to leverage the analytics for and really draw a connection between our efforts and the actual analytics that are shown in the systems.
So maybe you mentioned this, but the KM champion, where does that person sit within the organization, and how do you identify that person?
Those are the individuals who, like Mary mentioned, when you go and talk to people, these are the people who showed interest that, that we want to help. So every group within the organization have identified few KM champions, or people would, came out and say, yes, I will want to help. So they are within every group within the overall enterprise.
Yep, and Hasan, today is election day. Hasan goes around campaigning. He talks to individuals within that group and says, who has the most excitement and energy around this and wants to actually help me build my knowledge management empire? And those individuals are identified as KM champions.
Yeah, just a related question. So you listed the benefits and the ROI, but have you found ways to actually quantify those benefits so that you can show leadership and you're really making a difference in the bottom line?
Yeah, so a lot of that comes out of our content strategy, right? They have, 1 terabyte of information and they don't delete anything. And so we're really quantifying a lot of the work that we're doing around content strategy and designing the taxonomy and findability by showing that you have this many files that nobody can find, and now you have this many files that people can actually find, and they're acting on it. It's not just about findability, they're actually taking the information that they need and doing something with it. Another thing that we have thought about doing as part of our analytics plan is to ask people questions via survey of some sort about their level of engagement and how usable they find the systems that the bank offers, taking a baseline of that, and then once we roll out some of these changes, taking another kind of survey to say, have we moved the needle at all? So a lot of different approaches to analytics.
Are you seeing different cultural roadblocks at the leadership level and at the individual contributor level?
So surprisingly, at the leadership level, when I presented the concept, everybody came on board right away. So that was a I would say is a huge success for me. And when you have that kind of support, and then you talk to individuals at the individual's level, it comes.
Yeah, I think the most resistance is probably at the middle manager level. They're very busy and they don't see the big picture. They see the short term, which is, oh, I have to do all this work to set up these systems and to implement these processes and train my team on how to do KM. But part of our goal is to have them see the longer picture, which is once you implement these things, they're going to make your life easier, and you're actually going to have more time to spend with your team developing them and creating opportunities for them to collaborate. So it's really about communicating to them that this is the long game, not the short game. And it's going to be painful at first because looking through all that content and cleaning it up, that's no fun. But once you have clean information that you can access at your fingertips when you need it, you're really going to feel relieved. So it's about that.
Who's got the last question? Anyone? Yes, in the back, this gentleman right here. You.
I guess it links into the measurement piece, but I was curious about the sustainment of the efforts in the business. And the JE is one part of that, and maybe you thought about incentives as well beyond gamification. What kind of mechanisms have you been discussing with regards to sustainment in the business?
So about sustainability and how do we keep these going when, you know, we're no longer there? And I think a lot of people are driven by different things,
Yeah.
but career advancement is definitely one of those things.
Exactly. Go ahead. Oh, an initiative like this, you know, you're right. I mean, unless there are some incentive, they will not stick. So we, you know, as making it part of the job description, making them understand, you know, how they will improve their career. So one of the things that we are doing with the career development or training perspective, we are rolling out a program where, you know, if you are working in a development area and you want to move on to security and you have an interest, there's a, you know, a minimum set of skills that you have to have. So, you know, so we're providing those trainings and improvement in their skills so that they can move on to whatever career that they're supporting. So this is, like you said, you know, so it's very important that we have some incentive for individuals to stick with the plan.